A mother brought her daughter to a job interview. A millionaire who cried for not having children gets a hug from the little girl, and his life changes forever. Just before we start, drop a flag emoji that represents your country. Eleanor Matthews clutched her portfolio tightly, her knuckles whitening as she and her 7-year-old daughter Emma waited in the imposing glass lobby of Harrison Enterprises. The enormity of the moment weighed heavily on her shoulders. After months of unemployment and dwindling savings, this interview represented their last hope. "Mom, why are you squeezing my hand so tight?" Emma whispered, her bright blue eyes peering. Up through blonde curls, Eleanor relaxed her grip, forcing a smile. "Sorry, sweetie, Mommy's just a little nervous. This job would mean everything for us." "You'll get it," Emma said, with the unwavering confidence only a child could muster. "You're the best designer in the whole world." Eleanor wished she shared her daughter's certainty. The babysitter had cancelled last minute, forcing her to bring Emma along. Hardly the professional impression she'd hoped to make when interviewing at one of Boston's most prestigious corporations. "Mrs. Matthews," a sleek receptionist appeared. "Mr. Harrison will see you now." Eleanor froze. "Mr. Harrison, I thought I was meeting with Human Resources." "Change of plans. Mr. Harrison personally reviews all creative team candidates." Eleanor's heart sank. Robert Harrison, the notoriously demanding CEO, was a legend in the business world, and equally infamous for his exacting standards and frosty demeanor. "Emma, honey, you need to sit right here and not move, okay? Play your game quietly." Eleanor handed her daughter the tablet. "Promise me?" Emma nodded solemnly, already engrossed in her game. The walk to Harrison's office felt like a death march. Eleanor rehearsed her portfolio presentation, panic rising with each step. The door opened to reveal a vast corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline. Robert Harrison stood with his back to her, silhouetted against the afternoon light. At 62, he cut an imposing figure, tall and distinguished with silver hair. "Mr. Harrison, I'm Eleanor Matthews." "It's an honor to meet—" "You're late," he interrupted, turning to reveal striking grey eyes reddened at the edges. Had he been crying? "And I despise tardiness." "I apologize, sir. The security check downstairs took longer than—" "Excuses don't interest me, Mrs. Matthews." He glanced at her portfolio without enthusiasm. "Show me why I should hire you when dozens of other candidates have disappointed me." Eleanor fumbled with her portfolio, her carefully prepared introduction evaporating. She'd just begun explaining her design philosophy when the office door burst open. "Mommy, my game stopped working," Emma announced, bouncing into the room before Eleanor could react. Time seemed to freeze. Eleanor watched in horror as her professional aspirations crumbled. But before she could apologize or hustle Emma out, the little girl noticed Harrison's reddened eyes. "Are you sad, mister?" Emma asked, approaching him without hesitation. "Emma," Eleanor hissed, "come here right now." But Harrison raised his hand, silencing Eleanor. He regarded the child with an unreadable expression. "Yes," he answered simply, his voice softer than before. "I suppose I am sad." Emma tilted her head. "My teacher says when someone's sad, they need a hug to make the sad smaller." Before either adult could react, Emma wrapped her small arms around Harrison's legs in a fierce embrace. Eleanor watched in stunned silence, certain their last chance had vanished. To her astonishment, Harrison's stern expression crumbled. He knelt down to Emma's level, allowing the embrace to continue properly. Something shifted in his face, a glimpse of raw emotion quickly masked. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Emma Matthews." "I'm 7. She pointed to Eleanor. "That's my mommy. She makes the prettiest pictures in the world." Harrison stood, clearing his throat. When he spoke again, his voice carried a warmth that hadn't been there before. "Mrs. Matthews, I've seen enough." He straightened his tie. "You start Monday. My assistant will handle the details." Eleanor blinked in confusion. "But my portfolio." "That won't be necessary." For the first time, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "It seems your daughter has a remarkable talent for assessment." As they left the office, Eleanor still processing what had happened, she failed to notice Harrison watching them through. The glass walls, absently touching his chest where a small hand had momentarily filled an emptiness, 30 years in the making. Robert Harrison stood alone in his penthouse, staring at a dusty photograph he rarely allowed himself to view. The image showed a much younger version of himself beside a beautiful dark-haired woman, her pregnant belly pronounced beneath a summer dress. 30 years, he whispered, his finger tracing the outline of her face. 30 years today, Elizabeth. The anniversary always gutted him. His wife and unborn son lost in a car accident while he was overseas, closing the deal that built his empire. The empire he'd trade in an instant to have them back. His phone buzzed. A message from his assistant confirming Eleanor Matthews would start Monday. Robert set down the photo, remembering the little girl's embrace. For one brief moment, Emma's hug had filled the void he'd carried for 3 decades. Eleanor couldn't believe her luck as she arranged her desk in the sleek design department. Her co-workers seemed equally baffled by her hiring. "Don't take this the wrong way," said Melissa, the department head. "But Harrison never, and I mean never, personally hires anyone." "What happened in that interview?" Eleanor hesitated. "My daughter happened. She gave him a hug." Melissa's eyes widened. "You're kidding. Harrison doesn't do physical contact. Office legend says he once fired someone for trying to shake his hand, twice in the same meeting." "Believe me, I was terrified," Eleanor admitted. "But he just melted." "Impossible," Melissa declared. "The man's heart is cryogenically frozen. We call him the glacier for a reason." Eleanor's computer chimed with her first assignment, a major rebrand for one of Harrison's luxury hotel properties. The instructions concluded with, "Your daughter is welcome in the office any time." RHS, she stared at the message, unsure what to make of it. "Something wrong?" Melissa asked. "I don't think I was hired for my design skills," Eleanor admitted. "Then figure out why before he changes his mind," Melissa advised. "Harrison giveth and Harrison taketh away, usually the latter." That evening, as Eleanor tucked Emma into bed, her daughter asked, "Is the sad man your boss now?" "Yes, sweetie." "Mr. Harrison owns the company." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "His sad is really big, Mommy, bigger than when Grandpa died." Eleanor was struck by her daughter's perception. "How do you know that?" "I saw it in his eyes. Like the ocean when it's stormy." Eleanor kissed her forehead. "You have a special heart, Emma. Can I visit you at work? I want to give him another hug." Eleanor remembered Harrison's note. "Actually, I think he might like that." What Eleanor couldn't possibly know was that Robert Harrison had already begun. Making calls to his lawyer, his financial advisor, and a private investigator. The emptiness that had defined his existence for 30 years had momentarily lifted when Emma hugged him, and he was determined to understand why. Emma twirled in her yellow sundress, delighting in how it flared around her knees. "Do I look pretty?" "Mommy?" "Beautiful," Eleanor assured her, though anxiety churned in her stomach. It was Take Your Child to Work Day, and while other employees were excited to show off their offspring, Eleanor worried about Emma encountering Harrison again. What if their first meeting had been a fluke? Throughout the morning, Eleanor tried to keep Emma occupied with art supplies at a small desk beside her own. The child was a natural charmer, and soon had the entire design team wrapped around her finger, earning cookies from the break room and an impromptu tour of the building. Eleanor was deep in concentration when Melissa appeared at her desk, face pale. "Harrison's coming down. He never comes to the design floor." "What? Why?" "No idea, but everyone's freaking out. Johnson's hiding in the supply closet." Before Eleanor could process this information, the department fell silent. Robert Harrison strode through the glass doors, immaculate in a tailored suit, scanning the room with sharp eyes. Emma spotted him before Eleanor could intervene. "Mr. Sadman!" she exclaimed, bounding toward him with unrestrained enthusiasm. The entire floor collectively held its breath. "Hello, Emma," Harrison said, his formal tone softening imperceptibly. "I heard you were visiting today. I'm helping Mommy with her drawings. Want to see?" To everyone's astonishment, Harrison allowed himself to be led by the hand to Eleanor's workspace. Emma proudly displayed her artwork, a childish but heartfelt rendering of Harrison Enterprises headquarters, with stick figures standing outside. "That's you," Emma pointed to a tall figure with silver hair. "And that's me and Mommy." She indicated two smaller figures holding the tall one's hands. Harrison studied the drawing with the same intensity he applied to quarterly reports. "Excellent use of perspective," he commented seriously. "What's perspective?" Emma asked. "It's how we see things from different positions." Harrison knelt beside her chair. "May I have this for my office?" Emma beamed. "Yes, I can make you more if you want." "I'd like that very much." He carefully took the drawing, then turned to Eleanor. "Mrs. Matthews, I'd like to speak with you. Bring Emma to my office at 4. When he left, the department erupted in whispers. Melissa approached Eleanor's desk. "What sorcery is this? I've worked here 8 years and he's never known my name." Eleanor had no answer. How could she explain that her daughter had somehow pierced the armor of Boston's most notorious businessman? At precisely 4 o'clock, Eleanor and Emma stood outside Harrison's office. His assistant smiled warmly at Emma before ushering them in. Harrison was on the phone but immediately ended the call when they entered. On the wall behind his desk, Emma's drawing had been professionally framed. "My picture!" Emma exclaimed. "It looks fancy now." "Important art deserves a proper display," Harrison replied, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Eleanor noticed that the mysterious photograph she'd glimpsed during her interview was now visible on his desk. A pregnant woman smiled back from a gilded frame. "Mrs. Matthews," Harrison said, "I have a proposition for you both." "A proposition?" Eleanor repeated, her hand instinctively finding Emma's shoulder. Harrison gestured toward 2 chairs. "Please sit." Once they were settled, he pressed a button on his desk phone. "Janet, hold all calls and send in the package." Moments later, his assistant entered with a beautifully wrapped gift box, which Harrison placed before Emma. "For me?" Emma's eyes widened with delight. Harrison nodded. "Go ahead." Inside was an artist's set of professional-grade colored pencils in a wooden case with Emma's name engraved on a silver plate. "These are for artists," Harrison explained as Emma gasped. "Real ones." "Thank you, Mr. Harrison." Emma launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck in another spontaneous hug. Eleanor watched, amazed, as the formidable CEO awkwardly returned the embrace, his eyes briefly closing as though savoring a moment of peace. When Emma returned to her seat, already examining her treasure, Harrison cleared his throat. "Mrs. Matthews, I've been impressed with your work this week, but I have a special project in mind that goes beyond design." "What sort of project?" Eleanor asked cautiously. "The Harrison Foundation's annual gala is approaching, our major charity event. This year's theme is Second Chances. I'd like Emma to help design the invitations and materials." He paused. "With your assistance, of course." Eleanor blinked in surprise. "But she's 7. Precisely, she sees the world differently." Harrison's gaze drifted to the photograph on his desk. "Sometimes we need that perspective." Later, after they'd discussed details and Emma had tested her new pencils, Harrison walked them to the elevator. As the doors were closing, Emma asked, "Who's the pretty lady in your picture?" Eleanor gasped, but Harrison simply said, "My wife, Elizabeth." "Where is she now?" "Heaven," he replied, his voice steady, even as pain flashed across his features. "With our son." The doors closed before Eleanor could apologize for her daughter's innocent question. That night, unable to sleep, Eleanor researched Robert Harrison online. Past the business successes and ruthless corporate maneuvers, she found an old newspaper article. "Tragedy strikes rising businessman Robert Harrison, 32, lost his pregnant wife Elizabeth in a collision with an intoxicated driver yesterday." Harrison was overseas finalizing the acquisition that would later become the foundation of his corporate empire. The article included the same photograph that now sat on Harrison's desk. Suddenly, his interest in Emma made painful sense. Eleanor closed her laptop, wondering what she'd gotten them into. The man had lost a child, a son, and now seemed drawn to her daughter in a way that both touched and concerned her. As she checked on Emma, sleeping peacefully with her new art supplies carefully arranged beside her bed, Eleanor couldn't help but wonder, was Harrison looking for redemption or attempting to fill a void that could never truly be filled? The Harrison Foundation Gala was 3 weeks away, and Eleanor found herself and Emma spending increasing time in Robert's presence. What had begun as occasional meetings about the design project had evolved into something more complex. Today they were at Harrison's Beacon Hill mansion, a stunning historic home that felt unlived in, despite its perfect maintenance. Emma sat at an antique desk in the library, happily drawing while Eleanor and Robert reviewed her concepts. "She has genuine talent," Robert observed, studying Emma's colorful interpretation of second chances, a series of broken objects being made whole again by tiny hands. "She always has," Eleanor replied, "even when we couldn't afford proper supplies." Something in her tone made Robert look up. "You've had difficulties." It wasn't a question, but Eleanor answered anyway. After Emma's father left, things were challenging. "He decided parenthood wasn't for him when I was 7 months pregnant." Robert's expression hardened. "Some men don't deserve the gift they're given." An uncomfortable silence fell between them until Emma tugged at Robert's sleeve. "Mr. Harrison, can I see the rest of your house? It's like a castle." To Eleanor's surprise, Robert stood. "I suppose a tour is in order. Some rooms haven't been opened in years." As they wandered through the magnificent home, Eleanor noticed that while everything was impeccable, nothing felt personal. No family photos graced the walls, no mementos or keepsakes suggested a life being lived. Then Robert opened a door he clearly hadn't intended to show them. The room beyond made Eleanor's breath catch, a fully furnished nursery, preserved like a museum exhibit. Blues and whites, sailing motifs, a hand-carved crib, and shelves lined with children's books. Robert froze in the doorway, his composure slipping. "What's this room?" Emma asked innocently. "Emma, come along," Eleanor said quickly, sensing Robert's distress. But Emma had already slipped past, drawn to a stuffed bear sitting in a rocking chair. "He looks lonely," she observed, picking it up. Robert's voice was barely audible. "His name is Captain." "Captain needs a friend," Emma decided, hugging the bear. Eleanor watched Robert's face transform with grief so raw it physically hurt to witness. "Robert," she said gently, using his first name without thinking. "We should go." He nodded jerkily, unable to speak, but as they turned to leave, Emma placed Captain back in his chair and whispered something to the bear. In the car driving home, Eleanor asked, "What did you say to the bear, sweetheart?" Emma yawned, tired from the long day. "I told him someone would come play with him soon. He's been waiting a long time." That night, Eleanor received a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for today. For 30 years, I couldn't enter that room." Eleanor stared at the message, unsure how to respond. The boundaries between employer and employee were blurring dangerously. Yet she couldn't deny the connection forming between Emma and Robert, or perhaps more alarmingly, between herself and the complicated man whose pain seemed to match her own loneliness. What neither of them realized was that the Foundation Gala would soon force their carefully maintained emotional distance to collapse entirely. The night of the Harrison Foundation Gala arrived with unexpected complications. Eleanor's babysitter cancelled last minute, leaving her with no choice but to call Robert. "Bring her," he said without hesitation when she explained. "She's as much responsible for tonight's theme as anyone." And so, Emma found herself dressed in a new blue dress, a gift from Robert that had arrived that morning, walking into the grand ballroom of the Harrison Hotel. Eleanor felt out of place among Boston's elite, despite her own elegant gown, another unexpected delivery that fit her perfectly. "Everyone's staring," Eleanor whispered, as Robert guided them through the crowd, his hand lightly resting on her lower back. "Let them," he replied. "Tonight isn't about them." The ballroom had been transformed using Emma's designs. Her childlike illustrations of healing and second chances had been elegantly incorporated into everything from the ice sculptures to the massive donor wall. Guests marveled at the unique concept, unaware of its 7-year-old creator. "It's time for my speech," Robert murmured. "Would you both join me?" Before Eleanor could object, they were following him to the podium. The crowd fell silent as Boston's most powerful businessman took the microphone. "For 30 years," Robert began, "the Harrison Foundation has supported children's causes across New England. but we've done so from a distance, writing checks without personal connection. He paused, scanning the room. That changes tonight. Eleanor felt a flutter of unease. 3 weeks ago I met someone who changed my perspective. Robert's gaze fell on Emma. A child who saw past the CEO to the broken man beneath. Tonight's theme of second chances was inspired by her, Emma Matthews. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Robert continued. Emma and her mother Eleanor have reminded me why this foundation exists, not for tax benefits or social standing, but because every child deserves champions who see their potential. I've announced a new initiative, the Elizabeth Harrison Mentorship Program, providing creative education for underprivileged children. The crowd erupted in applause, but Eleanor barely heard it over the pounding of her heart. Later, as Emma charmed donors with her explanations of her artwork, Eleanor found herself alone with Robert on the balcony overlooking Boston Harbor. "You shouldn't have put us in the spotlight," she said quietly. "We're your employees, not your family." Robert's expression tightened. "Is that all you are?" "What else would we be?" Eleanor challenged, though her racing pulse betrayed her. "In 3 weeks, you and Emma have brought more life into my world than the previous 30 years combined." His voice dropped. "Surely you felt it too." Before Eleanor could respond, a commotion erupted inside. They rushed back to find Emma collapsed on the floor, her face alarmingly pale. "Call an ambulance," Robert commanded, already kneeling beside her. "She has a heart condition," Eleanor explained frantically, dropping to her knees. "Sometimes it causes fainting spells. Her medication, it's at home." "My car is faster," Robert said, already lifting Emma's limp form. "Which hospital?" "Boston Children's. They know her case." As they raced through the night, Emma regained consciousness in the back seat, her head on Eleanor's lap. "I'm sorry I ruined the party," she whispered. "You didn't ruin anything, sweetheart," Eleanor assured her, brushing back damp curls from her forehead. Robert's eyes met Eleanor's in the rearview mirror, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I'm calling Dr. Winters, best pediatric cardiologist in the country. He owes me a favor." "We can't afford. This isn't about money." Robert cut her off sharply, then softer. "Please, Eleanor, let me help her." In that moment, watching Robert's composed facade crumble with concern for her daughter, Eleanor recognized the dangerous truth she'd been avoiding. They had already crossed the line from professional to personal, and there would be no going back. The emergency room lights cast harsh shadows across Emma's pale face as doctors rushed her through double doors, leaving Eleanor and Robert in the waiting area. Eleanor paced frantically, her gala dress incongruously elegant against the sterile hospital backdrop. "She's had episodes before, but never this severe," Eleanor's voice cracked. "The doctors said her condition could worsen as she grows, but I thought we had more time." Robert stood motionless, his customary composure shattered. His mind flashed to another hospital 30 years before, the same helplessness, the same sickening fear. He pulled out his phone and stepped away. When he returned minutes later, his face had hardened into the expression his business rivals knew well, the look of a man who refused to lose. "Dr. Winters is flying in from Chicago. His plane lands in an hour." Eleanor looked up, startled. "How did you—" "I had his pilot diverted mid-flight." Robert's tone left no room for argument. "He's bringing equipment for a specialized cardiac assessment." "Robert, we can't accept— This isn't charity, Eleanor." His voice softened unexpectedly. "When Elizabeth died, I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to save someone else's—" He couldn't finish. Eleanor's protests died on her lips. For the first time, she saw beyond the powerful businessman to the broken man beneath, the one Emma had somehow recognized instantly. A young doctor approached them, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Matthews, I'm Dr. Patel. We've stabilized Emma and run preliminary tests." "What's happening to my daughter?" Eleanor demanded. "Emma has an atrial septal defect, essentially a hole between chambers of her heart. It's larger than her previous scans indicated, which explains tonight's episode. She'll need surgery soon." Eleanor swayed slightly, and to her surprise, Robert's hand found hers, steadying her. "How soon?" Robert asked. "Ideally within the month." The procedure is complex but has a high success rate. Dr. Patel hesitated. I understand Dr. Winters is on his way. He pioneered a minimally invasive technique for this exact condition. As the doctor left, Eleanor collapsed into a chair. I can't afford specialized surgery. My insurance barely covers basic treatments. Robert knelt before her, still in his impeccable tuxedo, now rumpled from the night's chaos. Eleanor, look at me. When she raised her eyes, his were fierce with determination. Money is the one problem in this situation we don't have. Everything else, Emma's health, the surgery, recovery, those are the real challenges. Let me remove the financial burden so you can focus on what matters. Why? Eleanor whispered. Why us? You barely know us. Something shifted in Robert's expression. Vulnerability replacing the commanding presence he showed the world. Because when Emma hugged me that day in my office, it was the first time in 30 years I felt hope, like maybe there was still purpose beyond building bigger buildings and larger bank accounts. He hesitated, then added quietly, and because in 3 weeks you've shown me more genuine humanity than I've experienced in decades. A nurse appeared before Eleanor could respond. Ms. Matthews, Emma's asking for both of you. They found Emma in a pediatric room decorated with colorful underwater scenes, looking tiny against the white sheets, monitors beeping steadily beside her. Mr. Harrison, she brightened when she saw him. You came too. Of course I did, he replied, his voice gentler than Eleanor had ever heard it. The doctor said I have a hole in my heart, Emma informed them solemnly, like the broken things in my drawings that need fixing. Eleanor sat on the bed, smoothing her daughter's hair. That's right, sweetheart, and there's a special doctor coming to help fix it. Will it hurt? Fear crept into Emma's voice for the first time. Before Eleanor could answer, Robert sat carefully on the edge of the bed. Yes, he said honestly, but then it will get better. And you know what? You're the bravest person I've ever met. Braver than you? Emma asked, wide-eyed. Much braver, he confirmed. I just wear expensive suits and yell at people. That doesn't take courage. Emma giggled, then grew serious again. Mommy looks scared. Mommies always worry, Robert told. Her. It's their job. Can you take care of Mommy while I'm getting fixed? Emma asked. She forgets to eat lunch sometimes. Something passed between Eleanor and Robert, a current of understanding that transcended words. I promise, Robert said solemnly. Hours later, after Dr. Winters had arrived and conducted his examination, after Emma had finally fallen asleep under the influence of mild sedatives, Eleanor and Robert sat in the hospital cafeteria. Dawn was breaking over Boston, casting golden light through the windows. Dr. Winters says she's an excellent candidate for his procedure, Robert said, pushing a sandwich toward Eleanor that she hadn't touched. Eat. You promised Emma. Eleanor managed a small smile, taking a bite. He also said the recovery will be months, not weeks. I can't take that much time off work. Actually, Robert set down his coffee, that's something we need to discuss. The intensity in his eyes made Eleanor pause. Whatever Robert Harrison was about to propose would change everything. She was certain of it. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Robert's private office in the Harrison Enterprises building. Eleanor sat across from him, exhaustion etched on her face after 3 days of barely leaving Emma's hospital bedside. You wanted to talk? Eleanor asked, clutching the coffee Robert had handed her like a lifeline. Robert nodded, uncharacteristically hesitant. He'd rehearsed this conversation countless times since that night at the hospital, yet now found himself struggling for words. Emma's surgery is scheduled for next week, he began. Dr. Winters is optimistic, but as you know, the recovery will be extensive. I've already applied for family medical leave, Eleanor said. It's unpaid, but at least I won't lose my position. That's actually what I wanted to discuss. Robert stood, pacing the length of his office. I've spent 3 decades building this company, focusing on nothing else. I told myself it was Elizabeth's legacy, that she would have wanted me to succeed. He paused by the window. But the truth is, I was hiding from my grief in boardrooms and balance sheets. Eleanor waited, sensing there was more. When Emma collapsed at the gala, something became very clear to me. He turned to face her. Life is fragile, Eleanor, and I've wasted too much of mine. And what are you saying, Robert? He took a deep breath. I'm taking a 6-month sabbatical from Harrison Enterprises. The board has been notified, and my COO will handle day-to-day operations. Eleanor's eyes widened. 6 months? But why? I want to be there for Emma's recovery, he said simply. And for you. Eleanor set down her coffee cup with a sharp click. Robert, this is. I appreciate everything you've done, but this crosses a line. We can't accept this level of involvement in our lives. Why not? He challenged. Give me one reason that isn't about pride or what others might think. Because it's not sustainable. Eleanor stood now too, her exhaustion giving way to emotion. What happens when Emma recovers and we go back to being normal people? When you remember that I'm just your employee and she's just a child who gave you a hug? We can't build our lives around a temporary connection. Robert stepped closer. Is that what you think this is? Temporary? What else could it be? You're Robert Harrison. You run a billion-dollar empire. We're not part of your world. You're wrong, he said quietly. For the first time in 30 years, I feel like I'm part of the world again because of you, both of you. Eleanor turned away, overwhelmed. This is crazy. We've known each other less than a month. Sometimes a month can change everything. Robert hesitated, then added, I've purchased a house on the Cape. It's peaceful, right on the water, perfect for Emma's recovery. There's a guest cottage on the property where you could stay. You bought a house? Eleanor couldn't mask her shock. Just for this? I've been thinking about it for years, Robert admitted, but never had a reason until now. Eleanor shook her head in disbelief. This is too much, too fast. Perhaps, Robert acknowledged, but Emma's surgery is in 4 days. You need somewhere to recuperate with her afterward, somewhere peaceful with help nearby. He softened his tone. The guest cottage has its own entrance, its own everything. You'd have complete privacy and independence. And where would you be? In the main house, available if needed, absent when not. He met her gaze steadily. No expectations, Eleanor. Only support. She turned to the window, trying to process everything. Below, Boston continued its bustling pace, unaware of the life-altering conversation happening above. There's something else you should know, Robert said. I've established a trust for Emma's medical expenses, past, present, and future. Regardless of your decision about the Cape House, the trust stands. Eleanor spun around. You can't just... It's done, he said firmly. Consider it the first grant from the Elizabeth Harrison Foundation's new healthcare initiative. Tears sprang to Eleanor's eyes, from gratitude, confusion, and 1,000 other emotions she couldn't name. Why are you doing this? Really? Robert's carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing a vulnerability that stunned Eleanor. Because for 30 years, I've been a ghost in my own life, he confessed. I built this company thinking it would fill the void Elizabeth and our son left behind. It didn't. Nothing did until Emma walked into my office and saw me, really saw me. And then I met you with your fierce independence and devotion to her. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I'm 62 years old, Eleanor. I've achieved everything I thought mattered, only to realize none of it does. Is it so hard to believe that I want something real before it's too late? Eleanor studied his face, searching for any sign of insincerity. Finding none, she took a shaky breath. I need to think about this, to talk to Emma's doctors. Of course, Robert agreed immediately. Take all the time you need. As Eleanor left his office, Robert returned to the window, watching her cross the plaza below. For the first time in decades, he felt terrified, because for the first time in decades he had something precious to lose. The Cape Cod house exceeded even Eleanor's expectations. Situated on a private stretch of beach with panoramic ocean views, the shingled main house was classic New England charm at its finest, though clearly renovated with modern luxuries. The guest cottage, a short stone path from the main residence, was a smaller version with its own deck overlooking the water. Emma pressed her face against the car window as they drove up the winding drive, her excitement momentarily overshadowing the discomfort of her surgical scar. It looks like a fairy, Tail house, Mommy. Eleanor caught Robert's smile in the rearview mirror, a genuine one that transformed his usually serious face. Wait until you see inside, he told Emma. There's a special room I think you'll like. The special room turned out to be a sun-filled studio space equipped with every art supply imaginable, easels, paints, clay, and drawing materials, arranged at the perfect height for a 7-year-old. Emma's gasp of delight echoed through the house. Dr. Winters said art therapy would be excellent for your recovery, Robert explained. Creative activities rebuild confidence and provide emotional outlets during physical healing, Eleanor touched. A set of professional watercolors reverently. This must have cost— Don't, Robert interrupted gently. Please. Later, after they'd settled into the guest cottage and Emma was napping, still easily fatigued 2 weeks post-surgery, Eleanor found Robert on the main house's deck, gazing out at the Atlantic. Thank you, she said simply, joining him at the railing. This place is perfect for her recovery. I'm glad you agreed to come, he replied. I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I, Eleanor admitted. But when Dr. Winters recommended sea air and a stress-free environment, she shrugged. It was the right decision for Emma. And for you? Robert asked carefully. Eleanor considered the question. The past month had been a whirlwind, from job interview to hospital crisis, to this strange arrangement with a man she was still trying to understand. Yet beneath the chaos, something undeniably genuine had emerged between them. I'm still figuring that out, she answered honestly. Robert nodded, accepting her uncertainty. I had the kitchen stocked with groceries. There's a chef available if you prefer, though. I enjoy cooking, Eleanor said. It's therapeutic. Then perhaps— Robert hesitated. Perhaps you'd join me for dinner tonight? You could cook if you'd like. I'm terrible in the kitchen. Elizabeth always teased me about it. The mention of his late wife hung between them. It was the first time he'd spoken of her so naturally. I'd like that, Eleanor said. Though I warn you, my specialties are comfort. Food, not gourmet cuisine. Perfect, Robert replied. I've had enough pretentious restaurant meals to last a lifetime. That evening, after checking that Emma was sleeping soundly, Eleanor made her way to the main house. She found Robert in the gourmet kitchen, attempting to decipher a corkscrew with comical concentration. Need help? She offered, smiling despite herself. Please. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals less complicated than this contraption. Eleanor took the wine bottle and opener, deftly removing the cork. As she began preparing ingredients for a simple pasta dish, Robert sat at the kitchen island, content to watch. You seem different here, Eleanor observed. More relaxed. I am, he acknowledged. Harrison, the CEO, exists in Boston. Here I'm just Robert. And who is just Robert? She asked, genuinely curious. He considered this while she chopped vegetables. I'm not entirely sure anymore. I've been playing a role for so long I've almost forgotten. Well, Eleanor said, lightly, you have 6 months to figure it out. As the evening progressed, they found themselves sharing stories over pasta and wine. Eleanor describing her childhood in a small Maine town, Robert recounting adventures from his early business days. Neither mentioned the growing connection between them, though it hummed in the air like the distant sound of waves breaking on shore. After dinner, they walked along the moonlit beach, maintaining a careful distance while discussing Emma's recovery. Plan? She's already sketching again, Eleanor said. The art studio was inspired. I've arranged for a tutor to continue her schooling once she's stronger, Robert replied. And a physical therapist will visit 3 times weekly. Eleanor stopped walking, turning to face him. Why are you doing all this? And don't say it's because she hugged you. Robert was silent for a long moment, waves washing over their bare feet as they stood on the wet sand. Because that hug showed me what I'd been missing, he finally said. Not just family or connection, but purpose beyond wealth accumulation. Emma saw me, the real me, when no one else had in decades. And me? Eleanor asked softly. Where do I fit in this scenario? Robert stepped closer, the moonlight silvering his hair. You're the most remarkable woman I've ever met, Eleanor. Fiercely independent, brilliant, devoted to your daughter above. All else, his voice dropped. I admire you more than you know. The tension between them intensified. Eleanor acutely aware of how easy it would be to close the distance, and how complicated that would make everything. "It's getting late," she said, stepping back. "I should check on Emma." Robert nodded, respecting her withdrawal. "Of course." As they walked back toward the houses, Eleanor gathered her courage. "Robert?" "Yes? I'm glad we came here," she admitted. "It's not just for Emma." His smile in the darkness was answer enough. Neither of them noticed the black sedan parked discreetly down the private road, or the telephoto lens capturing their beach walk from a distance. The wheels of a plan set in motion decades ago were beginning to turn, threatening the fragile peace they'd found on this quiet stretch of shore. 2 months into their stay at the Cape House, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Emma grew, stronger daily, her surgical scar healing well as she divided her time between art projects, tutoring sessions, and carefully supervised beach walks. Eleanor had begun freelance design work from the cottage, while Robert split his attention between remote board meetings and teaching Emma to play chess on the main house's porch. They were having breakfast together on the deck. Now a morning tradition, when Robert's security chief arrived unexpectedly. "Sorry to interrupt, sir," Davis said, his expression grim. "There's a situation requiring your immediate attention." Robert excused himself, following Davis inside. When he returned 20 minutes later, his face had hardened into the mask Eleanor recognized from their first meeting. All traces of the relaxed man she'd come to know vanished. "What's wrong?" she asked, as Emma busied herself feeding crusts to seagulls. "Nothing to concern yourself with," Robert replied, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. Later, after Emma's tutor arrived, Eleanor found Robert in his study staring at photographs spread across his desk. She knocked softly on the open door. "Business problem?" she asked. Robert hesitated, then gestured her in, closing the door behind her. "Not exactly," he indicated. The photos, long-range shots of them walking on the beach, Emma playing on the deck, Eleanor working in the cottage window. "Someone's been watching us," Eleanor breathed, a chill running through her despite the warm June day. "For at least 3 weeks," Robert confirmed. "My security team discovered the surveillance during a routine perimeter check." "But why? Who would—" "That's the interesting question." Robert handed her a typed report. "The photographer works for a private investigator named James Mercer." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "Did you say Mercer?" Robert's eyes narrowed at her reaction. "You recognize the name?" It wasn't a question, but Eleanor nodded anyway, sinking into a chair. "James Mercer is Emma's paternal grandfather." "What?" Robert's voice sharpened. "I thought Emma's father abandoned you before she was born." "He did," Eleanor confirmed. "But his parents, wealthy Bostonians who never approved of me, offered a substantial settlement if I agreed to keep their family name out of everything. They wanted no connection to their inconvenient granddaughter. And you accepted?" Robert couldn't mask his disapproval. "I was 24, pregnant, and alone." Eleanor shot back defensively. "The money allowed me to finish my degree and provide for Emma during her first years." Her voice softened. "I never told her about them. What was the point? They made it clear they wanted nothing to do with her." Robert paced the room, his mind racing. "Yet now they're having us watched. Why, after 7 years of silence?" Eleanor's stomach twisted with sudden understanding. "The gala. We were in the society pages, Robert. If they saw those photographs of you with Emma and me, they would wonder about my interest in their granddaughter," Robert finished grimly. "But that doesn't explain why they'd care now after all this time." Eleanor bit her lip. "There's something I haven't told you. Emma's father, Andrew Mercer, died last year in a climbing accident in Switzerland. It was in the papers. The Mercers lost their only son." Robert's expression darkened. "And now they see their granddaughter with one of Boston's wealthiest men." "Are you think they're worried about inheritance claims?" Eleanor asked incredulously. "I think," Robert said carefully, "that people who would reject an innocent child over social standing are capable of considerable calculation." A knock interrupted them. Emma's tutor stood at the door, her face concerned. "Miss Matthews, there's someone at the gate insisting on seeing Emma, an older couple named Mercer." Eleanor's face drained of color. Robert moved immediately to her side, his hand on her shoulder. "Tell them Miss Matthews is unavailable," he instructed the tutor. "And please take Emma to the studio. Stay with her." After the tutor left, Eleanor turned to Robert, panic in her eyes. "They're here, after 7 years of pretending she doesn't exist. They just show up." "I'll handle this," Robert said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You don't have to see them." "Yes, I do." Eleanor straightened her shoulders, but not alone. 20 minutes later, they sat in Robert's formal living room across from James and Vivian Mercer, the epitome of Boston Brahmin aristocracy in their perfectly tailored summer clothes and carefully maintained appearances. Despite being in their 70s, both carried themselves with rigid posture that spoke of lifelong privilege. "This is highly irregular," James Mercer began, his gaze coldly assessing Robert. "We expected to speak with Eleanor privately. Ms. Matthews has asked me to be present," Robert replied evenly. "This is my home, after all." Vivian Mercer's eyes narrowed. "Yes, about that arrangement. We find it most unusual." "Why are you here?" Eleanor cut in, her voice steadier than she felt. "You made your position regarding Emma abundantly clear 7 years ago." James shifted uncomfortably. "Circumstances change. Since Andrew's passing, we've reconsidered our position." "How convenient." Eleanor's tone was acid. "And it has nothing to do with seeing us in the papers with Robert Harrison." Vivian flushed but maintained her composure. "We've been following Emma's progress for some time. When we learned of her heart condition and surgery, naturally we were concerned." "Naturally," Robert echoed, his skepticism evident. "Which explains why you hired a private investigator rather than simply reaching out." "We needed to assess the situation," James replied stiffly. "Particularly the nature of your involvement with our granddaughter." Robert's eyes flashed dangerously. "Your granddaughter? The one you paid to disappear from your family tree?" "That's quite enough," Vivian snapped. "We've come with a proposition." She removed legal documents from her handbag, placing them on the coffee table. "We're prepared to establish a trust for Emma's education and future. In return, we request regular visitation rights and the Matthews name to be legally changed to Mercer." Eleanor stared at the documents in disbelief. "You want to brand her now that it's convenient, after rejecting her entire existence?" "We want to correct a mistake," James insisted. "Andrew is gone. Emma is our only family legacy now." "She's not a legacy," Eleanor's voice shook with fury. "She's a little girl who's been through heart surgery, a child you've never once sent a birthday card to, let alone visited." "Perhaps we should discuss this another time," Robert suggested, noting Eleanor's distress. "That won't be necessary." James Mercer stood abruptly. "Our attorneys will be in touch. We intend to petition for grandparental rights." The threat hung in the air as the Mercers departed, leaving Eleanor trembling with anger and fear. "They can't do this," she whispered once they were gone. "They can't just appear after 7 years and demand access to her." Robert sat beside her on the sofa, taking her hands in his. "They can try, but I promise you, Eleanor, they won't succeed." "How can you be sure?" "Because," Robert said, his voice hardening with resolve, "I have resources they can only dream of. And unlike them, I've loved Emma from the moment I met her." The word hung between them, love spoken for the first time, though it had been growing for months. "Robert," Eleanor began uncertainly. "I know this isn't the moment," he said gently, "but I need you to know, whatever happens with the Mercers, you and Emma aren't facing it alone, not anymore." Eleanor looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. This man who had lost everything once was prepared to fight with everything he had to protect what he'd found with them. What neither of them realized was that James Mercer had connections that reached beyond Boston's social circles into the darkest corners of Robert's past, places where secrets had remained buried for 30 years, until now. "They can't possibly win a custody case," Eleanor insisted, pacing Robert's study where they'd retreated to discuss the Mercer's threat. "They've had no relationship with Emma. They rejected her before she was even born." Robert studied the legal documents the Mercers had left behind. "It's not custody they're after, at least not yet. They're seeking grandparental visitation rights, citing Andrew's death as a change in family circumstances." "Can they do that?" Eleanor asked, fear edging her voice. "Massachusetts law allows grandparents to petition for visitation if the parents are divorced, separated, or if one parent is deceased, Robert explained. But the courts prioritize the parent's determination of what's in the child's best interest. And it's definitely not in Emma's best interest to suddenly have these strangers in her life claiming grandparental rights, Eleanor said firmly. Robert hesitated. The situation is complicated by our current living arrangement. Eleanor stilled. What do you mean? The Mercers will undoubtedly suggest that your judgment is compromised by financial dependence on me, Robert said carefully. They'll paint this situation as you trading access to Emma for material comfort. That's absurd, Eleanor exclaimed. Emma is recovering from heart surgery. We're here for her health. I know that, Robert assured her. But from the outside, an unemployed single mother living in a millionaire's beach house presents a narrative the Mercers can exploit. Eleanor sank into a chair, the full weight of the situation hitting her. So what do we do? Before Robert could answer, his phone rang. The terse conversation that followed left his face ashen. What is it? Eleanor asked when he hung up. James Mercer has been busy, Robert said grimly. He's scheduled a meeting with my board of directors tomorrow morning. Your board? Why would they meet with him? That's what I intend to find out. Robert began gathering documents from his desk. I need to return to Boston immediately. We'll come with you, Eleanor decided quickly. Robert shook his head. Emma needs stability right now. Her recovery is the priority. But if this involves... So trust me, Robert cut in, taking her hands. Let me handle this part. After arranging for additional security at the Cape House and promising to return the following evening, Robert departed for Boston, leaving Eleanor with a lingering kiss on the cheek and the uneasy feeling that he wasn't telling her everything. That evening, as Eleanor tucked Emma into bed in the guest cottage, her daughter asked the question she'd been dreading. Mommy, who were those people who came today? I saw them from the studio window. Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Emma's hair. They're your father's parents. Emma's eyes widened. I have grandparents. Yes, Eleanor said carefully, but they haven't been part of our lives. Why not? Emma's innocent question pierced Eleanor's heart. Sometimes adults make complicated choices, she answered, struggling to find the right words. They didn't know how special you are. And now they want to know me? Emma persisted. They think they do, Eleanor said, but there's a lot you don't understand about the situation. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this revelation. Does Mr. Robert know about them? Yes, sweetheart. He's helping us figure things out. Is that why he looked angry when he left? Emma asked perceptively. Is he mad at my grandparents? He's concerned about us, Eleanor explained. He cares about what happens to you. He loves us, Emma stated, with a child's simple certainty. That's why he made us this house and helps with my heart. Eleanor felt her own heart constrict at her daughter's perception. It's complicated, Emma. Grown-ups always say that, Emma yawned, snuggling deeper under her covers. But it's not complicated. When you love someone, you take care of them. Like you take care of me, and like Mr. Robert takes care of both of us. Long after Emma had fallen asleep, Eleanor sat on the deck of the guest cottage, watching the moonlight on the waves and wondering how her life had become so tangled. 3 months ago, she'd been a struggling single mother desperate for a job. Now she was caught between a powerful family seeking to claim her daughter and a man who had transformed both their lives in ways she'd never imagined possible. Her phone chimed with a text from Robert. Board meeting set for 9 a.m. We'll call afterward. Everything okay there, she replied. All quiet here, extra security in place. Emma asked about the Mercers. His response came quickly. What did you tell her? The truth, simplified. She's perceptive, Robert. She says you love us. There was a long pause. Before his reply appeared, she's right. Get some rest, Eleanor. Tomorrow may be challenging. Eleanor stared at the message, her heart racing. Though the word had been implied in 100 small gestures, the house, the medical care, his unwavering support, seeing it in writing made it real in a way she hadn't been prepared for. She was still contemplating her response when a breaking news alert appeared on her phone. The headline made her blood run cold. Harrison Enterprises Board calls emergency meeting amid allegations of financial impropriety. Frantically, she called Robert, but the call went straight to voicemail. She tried his assistant, his security chief, anyone she could think of, but no one answered. As dawn broke over the Atlantic, Eleanor made a decision. She woke Emma gently, packed their essentials, and asked Davis to drive them to Boston. Whatever storm was breaking over Robert's head, they wouldn't let him face it alone. They arrived at Harrison Enterprises to find chaos, reporters clustered outside, employees huddled in concerned groups, security guards blocking access to the executive floor. "Ms. Matthews!" Robert's assistant spotted them in the lobby, rushing over. "Thank God you're here. He needs you, but he'll never admit it." "What's happening, Janet?" Eleanor asked, keeping Emma close beside her. "James Mercer brought documents." "To the board," Janet explained in a hushed voice. "Financial records from 30 years ago, from when Mr. Harrison was building the company. There are irregularities, serious ones." "What kind of irregularities?" Janet glanced at Emma and lowered her voice further. "The kind that could cost him the company, maybe worse." Eleanor felt the ground shift beneath her. Robert Harrison, the embodiment of corporate success and integrity, facing financial scandal. It didn't make sense. "I need to see him," Eleanor insisted. "The board's still in session," Janet hedged. "No one's allowed in." "Then we'll wait," Eleanor declared, guiding Emma to a seating area in the lobby. They didn't wait long. Within the hour, the elevator doors opened, and Robert emerged flanked by grim-faced board members. He stopped short when he saw Eleanor. And Emma, his composed expression momentarily slipping to reveal raw emotion. "Eleanor," he said hoarsely, "you shouldn't be here." "Yes, we should," she countered, rising to meet him. "Whatever's happening, we face it together." Something complicated passed over Robert's face. Gratitude, fear, and something deeper she couldn't quite name. "Mr. Robert!" Emma broke away, running to him despite Eleanor's attempt to hold her back. "Are those mean people trying to hurt you, too?" Robert knelt to Emma's level, his voice gentle despite the tension radiating from him. "Some problems can't be fixed with hugs, sunshine, even your special ones." "All problems get smaller with hugs," Emma insisted, throwing her arms around his neck. Over Emma's shoulder, Robert's eyes met Eleanor's, filled with a torment she'd never seen before. In that moment, she knew whatever James Mercer had uncovered threatened not just Robert's company, but the fragile happiness they'd built together. What she couldn't know was that the true revelation still awaited them, a secret buried for 30 years that would test the bonds they'd formed and force Robert to confront the most painful choice of his life. The Harrison Enterprises boardroom fell silent as Robert finished speaking. For 2 hours, he had methodically addressed every allegation James Mercer had presented. Documents suggesting that 30 years ago, the young entrepreneur had engaged in financial manipulations to secure the funding that launched his empire. "Those records are authentic," Robert concluded, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "In 1995, I was desperate to close the acquisition that would become the foundation of this company. I manipulated valuation data to secure the final funding." Murmurs rippled through the room as board members exchanged glances. "However," Robert continued, "what Mr. Mercer failed to mention is that 6 months later, once the company stabilized, I personally repaid every investor the difference with interest." He slid additional documents across the table. "These records prove it." The board chairman examined the papers. "If you made restitution, why keep the original impropriety secret all these years?" "Because the damage to investor confidence would have been irreparable for a fledgling company," Robert answered. "And because I was ashamed. It remains the only time in my career I've compromised my principles." "And why would James Mercer have these documents?" another board member asked. Robert's eyes hardened. "Because Andrew Mercer, his son and Emma's father, worked briefly in our financial department 7 years ago. He discovered these records during an archival digitization project." Understanding dawned on Eleanor's face as she sat in the corner of the room where Robert had reluctantly allowed her to observe. "That's when Andrew abandoned me," she said softly. "He wasn't running from fatherhood. He was planning to blackmail you." Robert nodded grimly. "He approached me privately, threatening exposure unless I paid him a substantial sum. I refused on principle, though I offered him a legitimate promotion instead. He disappeared the next day. And now his father is using the same information. As leverage, the chairman concluded. Yes, Robert confirmed, not for money but to force me to support their petition for grandparental rights to Emma. The room fell silent again as the board absorbed this information. Finally, the chairman spoke. While we are troubled by the historical impropriety, your subsequent actions and 30 years of ethical leadership count significantly in your favor. The board will need to deliberate, but speaking personally, I believe James Mercer has severely miscalculated if he thought this would turn us against you. After the meeting adjourned, Robert found Eleanor waiting in his office, her expression unreadable. You knew, she said. You knew Andrew had discovered something about your past. I suspected, Robert admitted. When you mentioned he was a Mercer and had worked here briefly, I connected the dots. I should have told you immediately. Yes, you should have. Eleanor's voice was quiet but firm. No more secrets, Robert. Not if there's any future for us. Is there? He asked, vulnerability replacing the corporate mask he'd worn all morning. After everything you've learned? Eleanor stepped closer. One mistake 30 years ago, a mistake you corrected, doesn't erase everything else I know about you. The man who opened his heart to a little girl's hug. The man who stood beside us through every challenge. Relief flooded Robert's features, but before he could respond, his security chief appeared at the door. Sir, the Mercers are downstairs, with their attorney and... He hesitated. And Emma. What? Eleanor gasped. Emma's with my assistant. She's supposed to be at the Children's Museum. Your assistant received a call claiming to be from you, redirecting them to meet grandparents who had your permission, the security chief explained. When she became suspicious and called your actual number, we realized what was happening. They're in the main lobby now. Robert's expression transformed from shock to cold fury. Activate lockdown protocol. No one leaves the building with that. Child. Minutes later, they confronted the Mercers in the lobby. Emma stood between James and Vivian, looking confused but not frightened. Mommy, she called, running to Eleanor's embrace. These people said they were taking me to lunch to surprise you. That was a lie, sweetheart, Eleanor said, holding her tightly. They didn't have permission to take you anywhere. We merely wanted time with our granddaughter, Vivian Mercer said stiffly, since reasonable requests have been ignored. Reasonable? Robert's voice was deadly quiet. You call attempted abduction reasonable? An overstatement, James Mercer scoffed. We were simply expediting the inevitable. Our petition for visitation rights will be granted, especially once certain financial irregularities come to light. That threat has lost its power, James, Robert informed him. The board is aware of everything. Your attempt to use 30-year-old mistakes as leverage has failed. Uncertainty flickered across James Mercer's aristocratic features. The courts will still consider our petition. Emma is our bloodline, our only remaining connection to Andrew. The connection you rejected for 7 years, Eleanor reminded him bitterly, until you saw her with someone wealthy and influential. This isn't about money, Vivian insisted, though her eyes betrayed her. No, Robert agreed unexpectedly. It's about legacy, about feeling your family line will continue. I understand that better than anyone. His words surprised Eleanor, who looked at him questioningly. The difference, Robert continued, is that I've earned the right to be in Emma's life, not through blood, but through love and commitment. He knelt to Emma's level. Emma, these people are indeed your grandparents by birth. If someday you want to know them, that will be your choice, but they need to understand something important first. Robert stood, facing the Mercers with absolute resolution. Emma already has a family. Eleanor has been both mother and father to her since birth. And as for me, he paused, reaching into his pocket. I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment. To Eleanor's astonishment, he withdrew a small velvet box. This isn't how I planned to do this, but perhaps it's perfect after all. Robert turned to Eleanor, opening the box to reveal a stunning emerald ring. I lost everything once and spent 30 years building walls instead of bridges. Then Emma gave me that hug, and you showed me what courage truly looks like. He took Eleanor's hand. I love you both more than I thought possible. Will you marry me, Eleanor? Will you let me be Emma's father in every way that matters? Time seemed to stop as tears filled Eleanor's eyes. You're sure, after everything today? More certain than I've ever been, Robert answered. Yes, Eleanor whispered, as Emma squealed with delight. As Robert slipped the ring onto her finger, he turned back to the Mercers, his voice firm but not unkind. You're welcome to petition the courts, but I should warn you, I've already begun. Adoption proceedings for Emma with Eleanor's blessing. Adoption, James Mercer sputtered. You can't possibly— Actually, he can, interrupted a new voice. Robert's attorney approached with documents in hand. And as Mr. and Mrs. Mercer formally relinquished all claims to their granddaughter in this settlement agreement 7 years ago, their current petition has limited legal standing. Vivian Mercer's composed facade finally cracked. You don't understand. Andrew was our only child. Emma is all we have left of him. Then you should have loved her from the beginning, Robert said simply. Not just when it became convenient. As security escorted the Mercers from the building, Emma tugged at Robert's hand. Does this mean you'll be my daddy now? Robert knelt again, his eyes moist. If that's what you want, sunshine. I've been practicing, Emma confided, throwing her arms around his neck in the embrace that had started everything. I already know how to say I love you, Daddy. 6 months later, on a perfect autumn day, Emma scattered rose petals down the aisle of the small chapel on the Cape property. Eleanor followed in a simple ivory gown, meeting Robert beneath an arch overlooking the ocean, where they'd first begun to acknowledge their feelings. The ceremony was intimate, just close friends and colleagues who had supported them through the tumultuous journey. In the front row sat Dr. Winters, who had not only saved Emma's heart but had become the head of the new Elizabeth Harrison Children's Cardiac Center, fully funded by the foundation. As they exchanged vows, Robert held both Eleanor's and Emma's hands. 30 years ago I lost the family I thought I would have, and convinced myself I would never deserve another chance. I was wrong. He looked from Eleanor to Emma, his voice steady with certainty. Some hearts take longer to heal than others. Mine took 3 decades and one very special hug. Eleanor squeezed his hand, completing their circle. And some families aren't born, they're found, exactly when we need them most. As evening fell and guests celebrated on the beach below, Robert stood on the deck with his new wife and daughter, watching the first stars appear over the Atlantic. Look, Daddy! Emma pointed skyward. A shooting star, make a wish! Robert smiled, his arm around Eleanor's waist and his other hand holding Emma's. No need, he said softly. I already have everything I could ever wish for. Eleanor leaned into his embrace, thinking of the journey that had brought them here, from a desperate job interview to this moment of perfect contentment. Full circle, she murmured. No, Robert corrected gently, just the beginning. Inside the house, on the mantel above the fireplace, sat a framed child's drawing of 3 figures holding hands outside a tall building. Below it, in Emma's improving handwriting, she had recently added 3 simple words, Our family now,